Hey everybody, today we're going to be installing crown molding in my personal house. Below that we're going to install a picture molding, and this is going to be great because we're going to have examples of both inside corners, outside corners, scarf joints, and end returns. We'll get into all of that. So where you want to start is of course get the furniture away from the walls and then draw the shape of your room on paper. So what I've done is I've drawn the shape of the room out. Now I'll go around with the help of another person because there's some long runs in here, and we'll measure all the walls and put it on our list and then take it downstairs to the chop saw. So here I've drawn out the shape of this large open concept floor plan. We have a kitchen, dining, living room, and then here's what we're going to need for this project. A chop saw, hammer, nail set, a block of wood, 15 gauge angle nailer, 2.5 inch nails, a coping saw, tape measure, some lightweight spackling, and caulk. Alright, when I measure outside corners like this one, you want to eyeball right through this wall. You want the measurement to be, move your head back and forth until you can see exactly where this wall ends. Alright, so it's important to notice that we're holding the tape measure down about 3 inches. That's where the bottom of the crown molding will be, and if in your corners there's any irregularities with the sheetrock, it could throw off your measurement. So you always want to measure down where the bottom of the crown molding will hit. Alright, so on a long run like this, it's over 16 feet, which is the length of our longest material. So there's going to be a scarf joint somewhere in the middle. So I don't need to take an exact measurement for this long run. I'm just going to cope one end of the piece, and I'm going to put a scarf joint here, which we'll go over at the chop saw station. Alright, so as you can see, we've gone around the room, measured all the length of each wall. This is the nailer we'll be using. It's a 15 gauge angle nailer, 2.5 inch 15 gauge angle finish nails, coping saw, very important for doing really tight crown molding work. Alright, it's also important to check to see that your outside corners are square, or if not, what angle they are. Now there's lots of gadgets that you can buy that'll help you find angles. What I find eliminates a lot of tinkering and buying a specialty toy that you're only going to use once, is just to cut a good 45-degree angle on 2 long pieces of straight wood and using that to see what the angle is. It's important that you hold them parallel off of the ceiling, and then you just look up at it and see if you can see light through the joint. Now I framed this house and I know that it's square. So I'm not going to go around and check every angle, but I would recommend, especially on an old remodel, to check both inside and outside corners with blocks like this. Once again, about 2 to 3 inches thick, 2 to 3 feet long. These are a little too long. If your joint doesn't fit right, go trim it on the chop saw until you find out what angle this truly is, and then you can make a note of that on your notepad with all of the measurements for the lengths of the crown molding. That way when you're at your chop saw station, you'll know to adjust the saw to a different angle if needed before each cut. Now you're going to have to decide where you want to start your crown molding. Crown molding, the easiest way for a right-handed person to cut the coping cuts is to go from left to right around the room. So as you can see, this wall is a slate tile. I'm not going to put white crown molding across the top of that. I like the way that it dives into the ceiling. So this is an obvious starting point for my room. I'm going to butt a piece into that stone, go left to right around the entire room. All right, this may seem obvious to some people, but let's look at the way the crown molding goes. It's going to sit like this. This is why we've used a tape measure a few inches down from the ceiling to measure in case there's any variables in the drywall finishing. And it's situated like this. The long swoop goes at the top. The crown molding does not go like this. No, 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 no. All right, so we've come around the entire room. We started at the far end of this tile wall, and the crown molding is going to have to terminate here somehow. You can see this is a piece of 1x. The crown molding is almost 3 inches deep. So we can't just leave a square cut like that. So this is going to get the return. Most rooms don't have a return, but often you do need to end the crown molding somewhere just kind of in the middle of the run or the middle of the field or the end of a wall. So this will get measured from the left end to here to this point, and that's going to become a 45-degree angle on the chop saw. I'm going to cut that like that and put a small piece in to return back to the wall. All right, we're going to start cutting some crown molding. Now, the first piece in any room is going to be square to square. You don't have to put a miter on the first piece. So my first piece is going up against that tile wall. So I've made a sample block with a test notch, fitted it to the tile, checked it, and I will transfer that now to my real starter piece. You can see I have the length of this piece of flimsy. This is MDF, medium density fiberboard crown molding, and it's really floppy. To get an accurate measurement, it needs to be straight. So you could do this on the floor, or I have a few supports set out for that. So now, another huge point to demystify crown molding. The bottom of the piece, we already talked about the orientation of the crown molding. The big swoop is up top, the more detailed profile is down low. Your crown molding will always sit with the bottom of the crown molding against the fence. This is the bottom. It always goes against the fence for all of your cuts. That'll take the confusion out of the cutting process, or at least attempt to. So let's get started. Okay, here we go. Second piece is here. We've done this first piece. It started at this stone tile. I put the notch in this end, cut the other end square. Now we're on to the next piece. So this has a miter, has 2 miters on it. Has an inside corner where it'll start and an outside corner at the right end of it. So let's do that. The bottom of the crown molding is always against the fence. Now, what I like to do is set this to a 45-degree angle, and we're going to rock this back and forth against the fence and the table here until we can tell it fits in there just right. This is completely flush against the back wall. This is completely flush against the base. And that feels good. What you could do is go ahead and make a strong pencil on there. Maybe bring a couple crow's feet off of it so you know. And you can use that as reference for future cuts. So let's get started. This will be the left end of the second piece. We have the left end cut. Now I just want to emphasize the importance of these outlookers, and I'll show you what I have here. If you're going to do much of this work, having an adjustable standout like this really keeps the crown molding straight. And I have 2, so I have one for the other end. We'll see. So to cut the other end of this piece of wood, we'll have to drag this molding, and I have another support out here. So that keeps it nice and straight, and allows us to get accurate measurements. We have the molding positioned on the right side of the saw now, and I've hooked the longest point on that miter. Run the tape out Our measurement is 144 and 11/16. Let's see if we can do this with one hand. 144 and 11/16. And you're going to mark that right there. So we have our accurate measurement on the very bottom of the piece. The bottom of the piece is against the fence, like we know. And this is the right end of the second piece. It's going to be an outside corner. So I haven't moved the blade at all from the first cut. I'm going to line this up. You can rock it around until you feel it fit perfectly, or you can go up by the line we already made. Let's see. All right, it's time to cope the piece. This is the inside corner. Those are the corners that you cope. You can really only do that well with a 90 degree or thereabout inside corner. Coping saw makes it all possible. So you want to arrange your teeth so that they're cutting, if you can see that, in the push direction. So that as you push, you're forcing the fibers towards the back. If you were to cut the other way or on the pull stroke, it would tear fibers out and you would lose this nice clean edge here. So we start out, we're going to cut on the waist side, so on this brown side, not on the white side. We want to leave that nice white crisp edge. I start square across the bottom. You could use a square to mark that. I just eyeball it. And you want that good and square to start. But from there on out, you want to be back cutting so that when this piece butts into the first piece, there's nothing on the back side of the molding to hold this joint away from being tight. So I recommend wiggling a lot. Well, that kind of sounds funny. But your saw, if you take out less material by wiggling, don't push too hard, just wiggle a lot. It'll let the saw move more freely. So you can probably see that angle. I'm angling away from the face of the molding, wiggling a lot. Now, you have to imagine another piece of crown molding is going to come through. And we're making this to fit inside of here. But as we get to what will be, this is more of a horizontal face, your cut needs to be steeper. So I can't just follow this around like this. As I approach those horizontal sections, I have to rotate the saw and back cut pretty dramatically. You just want to stay just away from that white painted edge. I usually blow on this a lot. And wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggling fast really helps you work around these inside corners. So you can keep this face, the blade on this side of the cut, well away from that edge while you're moving the back. You're wiggling, wiggling, you're moving that back around on the back side of the cut, and you're really hollowing it out before you bring the blade around for the vertical cut. Still angled away from the face, back cutting heavily. You know, 2 or 3 degrees is enough. Heavily isn't necessary. Now I'll just remove that piece. So if you can see that, this is back cut only a few degrees, whereas this, in relationship to this face, is back cut dramatically. That's going to allow this piece to slide on through. So here we go. We're starting out with another horizontal area, so I'm back cutting really deep. Just on the brown side, the waist side of the line. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Okay, I'm coming around the bend and approaching more of a vertical cut, so I don't have to back cut quite as heavily through here. Now, horizontal again, so I'm rotating the saw around. Dramatic back cut. Now, making this inside turn, once again, I'm going to keep the blade on this side of the material basically stationary as I wiggle the back side around into position before I drop. Oh, got a little stuck. Usually doesn't happen. Okay, there we go. Coming on down. Remove that. So if you have a little bit of extra waste on the inside corner, you can always clean it like that. And then for those of you who are real perfectionists, now this is paint grade material, but so you can caulk it. But if you're doing a stain grade, really fine piece of woodwork, what I like to do, you've stayed away, just away from that white edge, you can take this piece of sandpaper and just make a beautiful, crisp line all the way through here. Bend your sandpaper and give them that swoop. You can test it with the sample piece. That's pretty good. That's definitely good enough for a paint grade fit. And this is a big issue with fitting crown molding. This comes out of a machine, but you think it would be perfect, but it's never perfect. This piece could be a little different than this piece in the thickness or the distance between some of these points, and if it's not exactly identical, you'll never get a perfect fit. But that's especially true with real wood crown molding. You run into that even more, so something to look out for. But you can use a scrap piece like I've done here at the coping bucket, and I could fine tune that a little. I could rub off a little more, tighten the cut. The other thing I should mention is that this bucket is key. It's a perfect height for you to lean over, put your weight on the piece of molding. That's in essence clamping the piece into place, and you're in a good position to work the coping saw using your weight, putting your weight behind it. Seems to be the best way to cut this stuff. All right, so we're moving on to the third piece. It's just important for you to realize that if you're standing in this room looking out, we started here, we're working from what would have been our left to our right through this cut list. So I'm on this piece. It's going to have an outside corner, and this doesn't need a miter. It's just like the first piece in that it's going to butt right into the wall. So I'm going to go square to long, but the measurement is along this back side. And this is what really helps with having this list. You can really visualize what's going on. But you always, the bottom of the crown molding against the fence, this measurement is 53 3/4, and I will mark that against the back, very back. That's where you mark it, right there. All right, we made it through the house to this long run where we're gonna put in our scarf joint. I didn't measure this run, I just know it's longer than 16 feet. So what I've done is I've put a coped miter on this end of the piece. I'm going to come down to this end and put an angled cut in it. Miter cut. It's a bevel actually, and it's just better than a butt joint. It looks nicer, it's a little fancier, it allows for some expansion and contraction of the two boards over time. And real wood doesn't expand in that direction, but this MDF will expand in any direction it wants to. So this is the only time when I won't put the bottom of the crown molding against the fence. I flip this around just because this is the only direction that my saw will rotate. I put the top against the fence. I've set this to about a 22.5 degree cut. I chop the first piece, and then before losing this angle, I go ahead and put that angle into another piece so that once this is installed, I can get the measurement for the remainder piece. So reminder, all your measurements, all your marks are going to be on the bottom of the board. This is what goes against the wall. This is going to get spun around when it's installed. That's what you measured when you measured out your pattern. You always mark the back side of the board with your crow's feet for cuts, whether they're inside or outside corners. That's where you measure. So this is the hallway piece. It has an outside corner on each end, as you can see, and then the measurements were made off the back side of the board. That's going against the wall. It was cut like that. Moving past the hallway, we have this short piece. It's going to be square on the inside corner and as a long cut miter on the outside. I've measured that. What's really important with this method, people, is that the left end is going to be square. You're always going to pull your tape measure off the left end. You're always going to mark the very back of this board when you make your cuts. So when this gets installed, that end will be square. The cope miter is going to butt into that. That's why you don't need to miter this. So always have that against the fence. Pull your tape measure off the left side. Mark the back of the board. And you'll be in good shape. All right, the next piece. 58 3/4. It's an inside corner. So I've pulled off the left end. I've made my mark on the back of the board. But since this is an inside corner, move the miter box the other direction. So when I cope that, I'll install it like this, and that cope will fit against the previous piece. This works for right-handed people only, and it's because it allows you to cope this more easily with your right hand. If you work around the room from right to left, you end up needing to cope with your left hand, and it's really difficult. That's why we're going in this direction. Okay, we're coming to an interesting piece. This angle is not a 90, it's a 45. So half of that is 22.5. We're going to cut 22.5 on this end. But this end of the board is coped to butt into the previous piece. So I've made that cut. It's a 45-degree cut. That'll get coped. Made my measurement along the back edge. And I adjust the coping saw to 22.5 for this cut. All right, the last piece. It's 39.25, and it goes from the 22.5-degree angle to the return. Now a return looks like this. Just cut an outside corner piece, and you cut another piece to terminate the run. This is where that piece of wood is upstairs. So, but the measurement on this one goes from the left end, which will be the 22.5-degree cut, to here. So this is a piece you don't mark along the back edge. You have to transfer the measurement to here. This is where the piece of wood stripping is. Now measuring by yourself can be a little bit of a trick. What I like to do is get my tape measure close, lock it down, and then go look at the other end and fine tune so that it's right on the money. Okay, our measurement is 39.25. I'll mark it here. Now just simply take a square, transfer the line, to the other side. So that's going to be outside corner cut, 45 degrees. I've already cut the smaller piece to finish off the run. The best way to cut these is to take a bigger piece of wood, big piece of wood, put a miter in there, Then you're just going to cut it right where the miter reaches the back edge. You can stand it up or lay it down in the saw, it doesn't matter. That's how you cut those small pieces safely. All right, it's time to install. So what I like to keep on top of the ladder is the nail gun. You can balance that. You can get a special clip, it'll hook on your pocket. You can kind of lean on it against the ladder, decide what's right for you, or you can have someone hand it to you. I like to keep a hammer, nail set, and a block of wood. Use this to put up against the bottom of the crown molding to tap on it if it needs to be shifted any. All right, to attach the crown molding, you have a couple of options. If you want to go the extra distance, you could rip a 2x4 strip. You go around the entire room. You could screw or nail this into place, and then that would fill that void and allow you a good attachment. You could attach it a few places to work the kinks out of the crown, but I find that's not necessary, especially with this lightweight and flexible MDF molding. So this is where the 2.5 inch nails really come into play. If you nail this in the right spot at the right angle, you grab good meat, and that nail, that 2.5 inch nail, goes through the sheetrock and hits the top plate. And that is on there. That's just one nail. That is totally on. And that's a great place to nail the molding. When you go to rub the spackling on there, it'll really disappear. So you can see the nail up in there. And that's what I recommend. It's fast, it's easy. Yeah, you can't beat it. What I like to do is leave the last 2 or 3 feet unnailed, because you might have to shift that piece a little bit to make the cope work for the next piece. Okay, now this is why I've left the last couple feet of this unnailed, because I can use this block of wood to tap that and shift it on the wall to make this cope as tight as possible. Here at the outside corner, I'll use a smaller brad, like an 18 gauge brad nailer, and I'll put nails in through both directions to hold that joint tight. All right, we're made it to the scarf joint. This is the long run, as you can see in the kitchen, and I haven't measured the remainder piece yet. So now that the scarf is in place, my assistant hold the tape, and I like to measure to this spot right at the point of my thumb. I think that's a good indication. Looks like 120 and 11/16. All right. These outside corners, you can twist the piece one way or the other, and you'll probably need to. So as I dry fit this, that's what I would call as dry fit. And I'm rolling the pieces both around until I get good alignment. And I'm clamping them there with my hand. All right, we finally made it to the end of the run. Here we go. This is the return that I cut. I showed you this earlier. I'm going to slip this up in here and nail it, but first, I like to put some glue on these. Glue doesn't do a whole lot on end grain of MDF, which is what this is, medium density fiberboard. But it adds a little, and every little bit helps. So I got glue on it. Sorry about the lighting. I'm going to slip that in. Now I've got it, you can see this is up off the ceiling, and we deal with this, you know, all along everywhere. I mean, this is a nice new house with truss roof construction, but you still get these waves and doodads. So I'm just going to flex that up. And I've been doing this throughout the rest of the room too, as much as I can. Get some nails in it. I'll run around the room and show you some of the joints. This is completely acceptable to me as a paint grade because that's going to get a bead of caulk, both top and bottom, down these miters, both inside and outside corners, and then I use the spackling in the nail holes. But I think, I'm going to bring you up here with me. You can see that joint. That's just because, you get out of the light, that's just the sheetrock and all the nuances of home building. There it is, end of the run. All right, so crown molding's up. Now we got to caulk it and spackle the nail holes. You can see the brad hole size. I use a lightweight spackling for that. And I just use Alex Plus 25 to 40 year interior paintable white caulk. It's nice to cut the tip. See if I can get that where you can see it. Cut the tip so you leave a pretty small hole. That way you can caulk the fine lines where the crown meets both walls. I would suggest, even though it looks tight and perfect as this one does, I would recommend that you caulk that anyway, because over time, the expansion and contraction of all building materials, and you'll just see that hairline crack. The caulk will help make that better. So there's a lot of work involved with preparing for paint, and caulking is not that easy, but it's got to be done.